It's often said that every good hero needs an equally good villain to round them out. Nintendo is home to some of the most iconic heroes in all of gaming, which means they likewise have quite an iconic roster of villains to counteract these heroes. Mario has Bowser, Link has Ganondorf, Donkey Kong has K. Rool, and so on. While these heroes may occasionally trifle with other antagonists, we all know that they each only have one true rival in their respective series. However, there is one rivalry in Nintendo's pantheon that I find a bit unique compared to the rest. The rivalry between the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter, Samus Aran, and the leader of the space pirates, Ridley. These two have been going at it for about as long as Mario and Bowser or Link and Ganondorf, and yet their rivalry may well be drawing to a close. Today, I want to discuss a question that's been lingering on my mind of late. Should Nintendo retire Ridley? Let's talk about it. Ridley debuted in the original Metroid game all the way back in 1986. He was designed, at least in part, to vaguely resemble a draconic version of the xenomorphs from the iconic sci-fi movie Alien, and was of course named after the film's director. Ridley was one of the game's major bosses, second only to Mother Brains in the antagonist role. However, as years passed and the lore and story for the Metroid franchise developed, Ridley would be elevated into much more than just the Big Bad's lieutenant. In truth, Ridley was the actual leader of the Space Pirate faction, both before and after their alliance with Mother Brain. Oh, and he also killed Samus's parents. Ridley was the one responsible for leading the attack on her colony when she was just a girl, and is also the reason why Samus eventually wound up being adopted by the Chozo. While the details of the manga are no longer considered to be completely canon, it's implied that Samus only lived because Ridley was something of a sadist. He wanted her to wander the ruins of her home alone, knowing she was powerless to do anything to save it or her parents. Whether intentional or not, though, sparing Samus turned out to be a serious mistake. After all, she grew up to become the fiercest warrior her galaxy had ever known, constantly foiling Ridley and the pirates' plans to conquer their known universe. Time and again, these two clashed, and while Ridley might occasionally get some good hits in, every encounter left his body increasingly damaged, to the point that he was slowly replaced more and more with machinery. He then reversed this process, somehow, around the time Samus was tasked with exterminating all Metroids. Ridley and Samus would have their final confrontation on Zebes, where Samus would kill him for good and leave his corpse to be consumed in the explosion that ultimately destroys the entire planet. That should have been the end for him. But then Other M happened, and it turns out the Federation made a clone of Ridley because these people are idiots, and we all know what happened as a result. That scene is infamous. That clone was eventually reduced to little more than a lifeless husk by the Queen Metroid, though. So it seemed like Ridley was finally beaten for good, for real this time. Until Fusion, where it's revealed that clone Ridley has actually been taken and preserved by the Federation aboard the BSL station. This is actually kind of a soft retcon to my understanding, as it was believed for a time that the corpse found here was the original Ridley that somehow wasn't completely annihilated in the destruction of Zebes. Regardless, this Ridley corpse was absorbed by an X-parasite and then absorbed by Samus. As such, it seems that the last remaining trace of Ridley's existence has been erased. As the second most recent game in the timeline, Fusion seems to spell the end of Ridley. The space dragon had an entire planet blow up on his corpse, his double was completely broken down, and unless there's somehow more of Ridley's DNA floating around out there, it seems unlikely that we'll be dealing with any more clone shenanigans. Granted, spirits and specters are established to exist in the Metroid canon, so the chances of Ridley coming back as a vengeful ghost are not exactly zero, but should he? Look, Ridley is iconic. He's arguably as much a pillar to the Metroid series as Samus or even the Metroids themselves. Hell, he's so popular that people pestered Sakurai into letting him into Smash as a playable character. Even so, I do think that Ridley has just about run his course. He represents a part of Samus's traumatic past that I think we can all agree she's overcome by this point in her career. And no matter how iconic a villain is, there does come a point when trying to bring them back over and over for pure iconography just becomes more tiresome than anything. Mind you, I do anticipate that Ridley could still appear in Prime 4. Considering it will probably appear earlier in the timeline, the fact that the space pirates are there also lends some credence to this idea. However, from Dread onward, I honestly wouldn't mind if Ridley just stayed dead. The Metroid universe is filled with so much potential, and there are plenty of pre-established threats that we still haven't explored. I genuinely think that Ridley and the Space Pirates should be retired as villains, especially after they've been so thoroughly beaten time and time again. But what do you all think? Do you believe that Ridley should be brought back, or is it time to finally let the Space Dragon die? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and until next time, stay bright.